this is 3 years ago when I applied for a job as a director for the whiteboard experience at Miro in 2021. And the only thing that I changed about this board is how I like this particular font here at the top left, like how I applied for a director role at Miro. And the context for this was that I think I don't remember the exact specifics, but there was a product management role that they were sourcing, and they approached me on LinkedIn, and I said like, hey, like I love Miro, let's just listen about it. We're looking for, I think it was called director for the whiteboard. Pretty sure that's correct, which was directly attached to the CPO, which was relatively new at the time. And yeah, so I said like, hey, you know what? Let's just try it. Let's see what happens. I'm very interested in this. Might be also a fun exercise. I was not applying for a lot of jobs at that time, and I was relatively long also out of the game. I was working at Small PDF for almost 2.5 years at that point. So the case that I received from for this director's challenge was we want to get from 3 million weekly active users to 25 million weekly active users in the next 3 to 4 years. What would be your strategy for the whiteboard as its product leader to support this goal? And I went with assumptions that inform us about how to continue, like focusing on the right things. I'm just like trying to paraphrase myself here. I don't know exactly what I thought about this, but some of these things are still the same when I think about problems, which is a funny one because right now I'm more of a I'm a solopreneur. I don't know. I don't apply to positions anymore. My stuff is coming in through inbound, and I don't go through these processes. But I see this also sometimes from candidates, and I really like it when they kind of break things down. It's just my personal preference. I like this. And I was looking here into the market situation. So, like, what is the compound annual growth rate that is happening in the market? Is it a commoditizing market, or is it like a type of like a red ocean market? I was assuming back then that it is commoditizing. I would say, good job, Leah. This is also how I see it today. Of course, the whiteboard market was heavily commoditizing. This was also the time when COVID was happening. Lots of new players coming into the market, but no one really making a dent other than Miro. ICPs, very important thing. Like we have to make some assumptions on like who are your ICPs. I was already kind of separating it by use case. This is something that I always highly recommend to people. If you bring in ICPs and people that are important, talk about use cases rather than just like, oh, like this is Gary from sales over there that we're selling to, or like, oh, this is Pete. He works in a finance organization. It's just too generic. Try to go with the use case. And I like this so far. I like this application. Very good. Then I was going into big bets versus short-term initiatives. Okay, let's see what this is about afterwards. I have some stuff that comes after this. And then, yeah, what is the most important acquisition channel? So at the time, I was working at Small PDF, and Small PDF was also very dependent on SEO. So I know a little bit, of course, what it means to have a dominant acquisition channel. This was before AI. This was before any language models, of course. So SEO still a very, very important topic, also for companies that have a predominant like one acquisition channel that is really heavily dependent on this. So I was going into like, hey, I'm assuming this is your most important acquisition channel. Of course, this was not a very outlandish assumption to make about Miro at the point. And then talk about the area of influence. So the area of influence is like when you're applying for a specific job, like these are the levers that I can pull, right? So like this is what I can do. So all of this stuff here is about the business itself. So like understanding the business. And this is like, hey, what is the thing that I can do afterwards? So you need to kind of always define this. This is also how I structure my presentations. What are the conditions? Can we agree on those, at least on a conceptual level? And then here's what I want to do. Because if you do not do this and you make wrong assumptions here at the beginning and you do not lay them out, then you might be making mistakes in here that you cannot correct afterwards anymore. And that's problematic because if you do make mistakes and you lay them out in the beginning, then someone can at least understand like, oh, okay, so she made a wrong assumption over there. So this is why she came to that conclusion. So at least your process is correct, even though it's like more of a one-sided thing where you present yourself in a meeting. Okay, let's go into this. So in the market situation, I was, this one I actually remember. So I went in there and I tried to analyze broadly what is the thing that Miro is actually doing. They're working like I define the market as like team collaboration, not just whiteboarding. and then go into like the submarket of online whiteboard. Then I went into the competitors: Visio, Creately, Lucid, Sparks, Mural, Miro, Envision. At the time, Miro was at 500 to 1,000 employees. This was the funding that they had. All of this is obviously very, very outdated. Go with their ICP profiles, have a segment of like, hey, what do they charge? Like, what are the differentiators that they have in this regard? So what is missing for me here, like if I would have to criticize myself from 3 years ago, is the differentiators and the use cases. Like, what do they actually address different? I was hinting at this a little bit here with Visio, for instance. They do not have pricings, which would be an indicator that they are serving more enterprise customers. I do not know whether I brought this up here, but just like from this presentation itself, it's not very helpful. I like to have world maps. They look really pretty. I don't know how useful they are right now, and how correct this entire market report was, but they look very pretty. It makes you look very competent as well. And yeah, but so this is an important one. I do think that you still should have an idea and an assumption on like whether a market is heavily commoditizing right now. So like, will you have to deal with more players that are starting to fight over you? In general, a market moves from here up here, right? So it's going to become consolidated, specifically if there's not another kind of bigger technological breakthrough happening in this particular area, right? So like when Miro came into the market, then they started down here. They were changing how businesses are holding meetings and how they collaborate with each other, and then slowly the market just moves up there. Or another example would be that AI has changed how we think about searching for information and so forth. Like the entire market became fragmented again because you had this huge change, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. And then companies are fighting, like who's going to dominate and so forth. And then everything moves up again. I think it's important to think about this for any company that you are applying to, and like just kind of lay this out as well. Don't spend too much time on this. Don't get into the weeds. You make a lot of assumptions. You're not an expert on this as well. So this is like on the market situation. I don't know what I wrote in here. I don't want to get too much into detail. But the second point would be on the ICPs. So my assumption here, so I defined 3 ICPs: a meeting use case, a brainstorming use case, and a project management use case. Yeah, this is also something that I find is very useful, like to think about frequencies. So like use cases can have different frequencies. This makes a lot of sense to me as well. Still, I think this is good. Um, Low churn, this is bad because I do not know whether they have low churn. This is probably a very outlandish assumption here. I do not know whether Miro was sharing any numbers with me. I don't assume so. Um, but like, don't make assumptions about the churn. What you can say is that customers who are in a lower segment in terms of like like single users they do have anyways a higher churn compared to teams and so forth. But this is relatively obvious. Like if you're interviewing at that particular level, that's maybe a little bit too detailed. I think. Other than that, this looks solid. Nothing mind blowing. I would not hire myself over this today. I would probably ask a lot of questions afterwards. And yeah, okay. Looks okay for me, but like I was just defining some ICPs and how we go about this. So a lot of definition from myself, which I still do. Big bets versus short-term initiatives. Yeah, let's go into this really quickly. So I was assuming that Miro is a mature product. With Miro, you can do almost everything when it comes to digital whiteboarding already. So this hints to a potential product saturation. It's true. I think this came also true. Fundamentally, Miro has not changed a lot in the last couple of years. So this was a correct assumption, I would say. This exposure visibility problem of Frankenstein. Adding more value does not mean that the retained users see it. I think this is a good point where I agree with my past self. If you add additional value to your product and you have a relatively complex interface like Miro has it, and you have a lot of people that are used to this kind of thing, then exposing new value in this interface becomes incredibly difficult because you do not want to piss off too many people that are using it. You have enterprise customers, you have individual customers, and so forth. So this is a problem. How can you solve this? I don't know. I just laid out here more problems instead of solutions. That's something that I do not like about this right now. So there is, testing new hypotheses is difficult. That's true, right? So like if you want to say that, hey, what if we tie this down to, I don't know, like a piece of hardware that we want to test, right? Like on a bigger scale, like whether our stuff works with this, then you need to also you need to put this somewhere in the interface that people can also see it. So A/B testing this kind of stuff is becoming quite difficult. And this leads to a lot of problems. So I was very focused on the problems here. There's no more obvious quick wins. That was my conclusion from this. And oh, cool! I was already talking about outcome-driven innovation research. I still think this is a fantastic thing. It's a book by Tony Olwick and Strategen, um, that I think is very, very powerful. And then I was going into the scalable product delivery process from Reforge. I always like to also note like where I have ideas from. If they are like specifically at this particular scale, I think it's nice that you also recognize what other people do, not to give them credit. It's just also to just show that, hey, like this is where I learned this from, and that it also shows a little bit that you're willing to learn and also are not just like a know-it-all. I think that's a really good thing in general. Like, just be gracious with your references here as well. um Vertical versus horizontal expansion. My bet is horizontal. Ooh, that one is wrong, I guess. Like, I think also for businesses like Miro, it's particular at this size, I would say that you should actually go more vertical at some point, at least with sub products. Like, I don't know, Miro for, I don't know, agencies or whatever it is. Like, I'm a big fan of like sub segmenting your product strategy. I think in this sense, I would not agree with myself, because if you just say like, hey, your bet is horizontal, then you try to capture more of the market on either side. I don't know. I think Miro is doing this automatically. This is a conclusion that would not follow from what I just said from before. So I think, yeah, I'm disagreeing with myself here, or like this is just not very well fleshed out here. A/B testing versus beta Miro 2.0 whiteboard, moving away meaningfully from an existing solution hard with incremental challenges. This is another thing that I also noticed in the last couple of years. Fundamentally, it's not that we do not know what to do about an interface that has become dated, which is not necessarily the case in Miro, right? But like, specifically, if you look at products that just do not look this nice, if you want to make bigger changes to a product, you have to sometimes forego A/B testing, because with A/B testing, you assume that you can just like always incrementally change smaller bits until you end up with the final vision. And that's not always true when we actually rework an entire interface. The problem that we have is when we change a product in a big, big way, that it's you need to see that the people that you are exposing to this, especially if you're a big brand like this, you have a lot of people who are used to the old interface. So even if you do an A/B test and you say like, hey, here's variant A and here's variant B, if variant B is this huge design change on the entire interface, then people who have been using interface A for the longest time will just not like it because it's a new thing. So the only chance that you have is to exposing it to new users. And with a size like this, you can probably do this and then start to see how they also follow through. But my experience here also was that it can be quite tricky to actually set up an experiment like this, specifically if you do a bigger change. What this does is it changes for people and regions in a way that is really weird. So, like, let's say you have a team and the person over there in the office is using Miro and they're getting now the completely new experience. The interface looks different. It's becoming really hard to work together with each other. So the entire setup becomes complicated. You have to probably regionally limit it. You have to kind of say like, okay, if one person from a company is in the experiment, then we have to expose the experiment to everyone in the same company. Now you're messing with the validity of the experiment itself. This is hard. This is really, really, really hard to do. And I think I would not put this on a director level. This is actually a CPO level, even at a company of Miro, where they have to just make a conviction bet, where they just say like, hey, we're going to change the product. We think that it is going to be better. And there's not going to be an A/B test behind this, at least initially. But we have to start with this like a new product and then slowly move people into this by clearly also marking it as a new product, right? So like Miro 2.0 or whatever one you call it. And if you do that, you're messing with the classical A/B experimentation setup, where you just say like, hey, we're not telling people, and we have just like a separation of people randomly, and it's just not a pure A/B test anymore. Like the reality is just very, very different. I don't want to stay for too long on this. And then a feature product matrix, where we need to clean up the core experience so we can implement testing layers and identify features that don't deserve the real estate. Yeah, this is another one. Like, hey, like killing features. It's a nice concept. It's very, very hard to do because you need to have a lot of buy-in from cross-functional leaders, and I think this is a nice concept that doesn't get executed a lot because it's just very, very difficult to kind of convince everybody that, hey, if we're just switching this off and it costs us 20 to 30,000, especially in difficult times right now, that people will be okay with it. Because it's hard to put numbers on like the reduced tech debt that you have and so forth. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so and then on the final point, so I kind of mixed SEO in here as well, like as an acquisition channel. It's kind of true. The area of influence on the whiteboard. So, like, what did I say that we could actually do? Well, I said that we can obviously influence retention, habit forming, satisfaction, CES. CES is the customer effort score. I'm in love with this. Like, I think it's a good thing where you ask people how easy was this for you after they have succeeded on a task. We have churn, horizontal, vertical expansion. From Whiteboard with other teams. Let's see what I was writing in there. Um, cool. So metrics trees, I really like those as well. I still think they're very, very good because it's kind of like a visual representation on like how you believe that revenue is coming together. So in order to drive ARR, we have to drive LTV per customer. Like this is some stuff that I was doing at Small PDF as well. We're thinking about, hey, these are the weekly customers that we have. This is what's causing churn. I'm not a big fan anymore of like separating churn and LTV because there's fundamentally, at least for product teams, they're the same kind of metric. I like to just keep them together. I don't think you make that much of a different choice um, in your daily product work if you look at LTV and churn in a separate way. I just don't think it really helps you in some kind of way. On a financial perspective, of course, this makes a lot of sense. Then we have referrals and customers, and I was giving some leverage numbers here, which I think is bullshit. It does not work in real life. It's very hard to say that if you increase the depth of usage per month, that this is improving your LTV by 10% and so forth. It still helps to kind of say like whether you have a strong lever, like whether something is strongly correlated to something. This is more like of a data science kind of thing. But like for an exercise, I would not even lean myself out the window that much anymore. This is just way too many assumptions here. Not well done, Leah. And then I just went into more kind of details down here. I also said I reformulated and repeated again the goal of the exercise. That's always a good one. Like once you are in it, like, hey, so here's the goal. What does this mean? This means month on month growth by 6%, the health metrics to maintain, and so forth. This is basically just like defining a basic experiment on this. So very, very useful. Still think that this is a really good one. Lots of colors. I don't know what the colors mean, but I guess I was in a colorful period of my life there. And yeah, so then value creation metrics and so forth. All of this is kind of fine. I think this is too detailed on a director level, but it shows that you also know how to work on an operative level with specific metrics. So I think overall this is fine, even though a little bit overcomplicated and also absolutely impossible to present in 15 minutes, right? Like you remember, like even me, just like now looking at this, it takes me more than 15 minutes to just consume this. And then, yeah, so we have a goal here, defining achievable, measurable OKRs that are connected to the company strategy and the team can move. Yeah, yeah. IPA framework, big fan of it still. IPA means like, hey, what is important to the business? What is the potential improvement? Like, is there potential improvement to this? And do we have authority of moving it? So whatever you do needs to be important for the company. So it needs to be aligned with the strategy. Whatever you do needs to also have a potential improvement still. Does this KPI have potential for improvement? And A means that you as a team or like you as a person have authority or means to improve the KPI. Mission to the team is driving weekly active users. Does this moving this metric influence frequent usage or creating a habit? This would be the mission to the team. And then the weekly active user creation. Do we have potential improvements within our ICPs? If you can answer these questions with yes, then you should do it. Whatever your plans are. And yeah, I don't want to get too much into details here. I'm just going to leave them on the screen so you can also read them. And I did not provide answers to these. So this is just me like laying out the problem. I highly recommend that everything that you lay out a problem for in an application process, that you also take a stand on like how you would solve it with a very simple hypothesis. So in general, I think if I was responsible for hiring a director right now at Miro without knowing the core business too much anymore, I would probably take really like specific examples. So I think I did this down here. So like, hey, here's a validation and then a long-term roadmap. Cool. So I came up with some OKRs, which is like identify underserved and needs to reduce churn, innovate in what is important and underserved for customers, and then some key results and some deliverables. Yeah, I think this is fine. It's a bit too high up and overall too complicated. Like, I don't know. I'm a little bit divided. Overall, I think good job, Leia, in the past, but this needs some refinement. I think Leia from 2024, hopefully as well, because I also hope that I'm growing, would have done a better job. But overall, I think this is a good kind of concept in how I approach still things and how I do business cases. So lay out the market, try to talk about the ICPs, do big bets versus short terms and so forth, and how do the most important acquisition channels work. And yeah, so I hope this was useful to people. This is how I applied to position back in the days. And yeah, this is also like giving some insights in how I evaluate candidates. And I think it's yeah, maybe this is interesting to people. So, what was the outcome of this particular process? I did not start at Miro, as you can see from my CV. I got very far in the process. I had a couple of calls with the CPO at the time, called Varun Parmar, and I think we disagreed on some core aspects on like what a director should do and what they shouldn't do. I think I also was relatively weak on the side of the design. So they also had a part of an exercise in like, hey, can you design a feature for the whiteboard, which I felt like was really weird as a director to have to do this. Um, I don't want to say that I felt too good for that or like too above of this in some kind of way, but I definitely came across that way, I think. So that was not that good. And then there's also some things in like, hey, I was not completely agreeing with the compensation, and I would have also had to move to Berlin. Um, and this did not really fit into my life plans. So it never really got to a complete conclusion, but I'm really thankful also for the process. And I think if you apply for a job like this and there's a lot of it riding on it, and I think you just kind of detach yourself also a little bit and you just say like, hey, you know what, I'm just trying to see what happens. I think this is why I also got this far, because I did not have this to succeed. I was not in a position where I had to take a job and like try to also bend myself to appear in the best way possible. And I think I retained this now over the years to also speak truth to power and also to people and tell them what I think is not okay and what is okay. But at some point, you also have to step down and just like be okay. Like let's disagree and commit and so forth. It's your show. But yeah, so that's how that ended.